Chapter 12 of the International Mechanical Code specifically discusses hydronic piping. Now, hydronics is not just hot water. Majority of the time we do use it for boilers in residential structure, but hydronics can also be used for chilled water or anything having to do with water in piping and tubing. So, Section 1201 is again the general scope of the hydronic piping chapter, which is 12. Talks about the pipe sizing, talks about what the piping does, and it also references International Plumbing Code, because potable water and hot water distribution systems need to be installed in accordance with the International Plumbing Code. Section 1202 discusses piping material. What's allowed is all covered in chart table 1202.4. Okay, talks about pipe fittings, what type of fittings we're allowed to use, and it very specifically talks about the standards that are allowed. It talks about flexible connectors as well and vibration compensators. Section 1203 talks about joints and connections. Okay, specifically says approval joints and connections shall be of approved type. Joints and connections shall be tight for the pressure of the hydronic system. Talks about how you're going to prepare the pipe ends, make sure they have full bore openings and not undercut. Talks about how you're going to braze the joints. Mechanical joints are the screws together, how you're going to solder them, and how you're going to either glue them together like with CPVC and PVC. Gives you all the different types of piping and what joints are allowed to be used. Section 1205 talks about valves, talks about shutoff valves, talks about where they're required, and talks about the type of valves you're allowed to use. It also says that a pressure relief valve should be installed on the low pressure side of the hydronic system that has a reduced pressure. The relief valve should be set to the maximum of the system design. The valve should be installed in accordance with 10.06, which is in Chapter 10, and it's Section 6. Piping installation, again, we'll refer to other codes as well. The International Plumbing Code and the International Building Code is used for pipe penetrations. That's where piping goes through another section. Talks about in 1207, talks about transfer fluids. Make sure you understand the flash points and make sure there's makeup water available. Section 1208 talks about testing of piping. For example, the hydronic systems have to be tested hydrostatically to 1.5 times the maximum system design pressure, but not less than 100 psi. The duration of each test should be not less than 15 minutes. Ground source heat pumps are tested in accordance with Section 1208.1. So ground source, again, before the trenches are backfilled, the ground source loops, in other words geothermal systems, have to be tested with water at 100 psi for 30 minutes with no observed leak. 1209 talks about embedded piping. For example, piping that's embedded in concrete. Okay, it says how that's supposed to be designed. So Chapter 12 has a lot to do with plumbing. However, realize it is not the true plumbing code. It adds to the plumbing code, specifically for areas having to do with heating and cooling a building. So at this time, go ahead and reread this chapter, having discussed it. Make notes on where different things are found. Take a look if you have access to them, some of the different code books. Pay very specific attention to how to join pipes, the type of piping that's used, and the testing that is required. Once you're all set, go on to your discussion questions, do your assignments, and you can move on from there and take your end of chapter quiz and then go on to lesson 13.